When an explorer or trader leaves Aquilonia westward and is fool enough to venture to the Thunder and Black Rivers, he finds himself on the Bosonian Marches. This region of swampy lowlands dominated by the two large rivers is the borderland of the great kingdom of Aquilonia. As de facto vassals of these sophisticated Hyborians, the Bosonian Marches are the first line of defense of the Flower of the West, as Aquilonia is often referred to. The unyielding population of the Westermark keeps the invaders of the West in check. The walled towns are defended by sturdy archers who are masters of repelling raiding parties. If they weren't, well, there wouldn't be any Bosonian people around. As a buffer region, the Bosonian archers can keep the Western barbarians up long enough until the armored knights and foot soldiers of the Aquilonians arrive to systematically and professionally deal with the said invaders. But who are these invaders? And what would eventually be the consequence of their more and more intense and frequent raiding? On the border of this swampy landscape of Bosonia stands an outpost, Fort Tusculum on the eastern bank of the Black River. When someone ventures west from that point, by the way, needless to say, nobody except for Conan crossed this wilderness that we know of for a long time. He finds himself in endless forests of towering evergreens reaching to the horizon. The forests are waving over and over on the countless hills, and there are swampy valleys between them, giving a home to all kinds of horrors. Shadowy beasts, demonic entities lurking in the dark. So if you survive the bloodthirsty barbarians, which you certainly wouldn't, some sort of abomination will probably maul you as you try to find your way in, or more likely out of this nightmarish, unexplored wilderness. For a long time, the Thunder River served as the eastern boundary of the Westermark, therefore the westernmost part of Aquilonia. Then the royal forces drove the inhabitants away, and subsequently the Black River became the newly established western border of the kingdom, as the settlers tried to push out the wild men and cultivate this land. This, of course, didn't come unanswered by the said barbarians. Forcing them out of their homeland caused the wild men to harass the settlers with frequent bloody raids, killings, human sacrifices, and all sorts of lovely things, which are part of the everyday life of the poor souls who left Aquilonia in hopes of a better future. Eventually, Fort Tusculum was destroyed by a Pictish shaman called Zogarsag, so the entire province was depopulated later on. On a side note, there happened the most tragic death of all the tales of Hyboria, when a good dog selflessly gave his life in a battle against the Picts, allowing the settlers' women and children enough time to flee. When Conan learned of their struggle, he swore to claim 7 heads for the dog, who proved to be a more valiant warrior than many a human. Rest in peace, Slasher. So, this is the land we are exploring today. This is the Pictish wilderness, an untamed, nightmarish, dangerous, and violent place, inhabited by the people who came there in the long-forgotten past. They are the namesake of this land, the Picts, the arch-enemies of the Cimmerians. During the height of the Hyborian civilization, the Picts lived in their caves in the mountains, occasionally raiding Zingara or the Bosonian Marches for food, weapons, or sometimes armor. Probably they didn't leave gold or good-looking women behind. Which barbarian would do that? These barbarians would eventually cause the downfall of the whole Hyborian civilization. Interestingly, all that happened because of the deeds of one man alone. His name was Aras. Some 5,000 to 10,000 years before Conan in the pre-cataclysmic age, the Picts were an ancient people hailing from the Pictish Islands, situated far west of Thuria and Atlantis. Over time, they expanded their territories by launching raiding expeditions and establishing colonies on the Thurian continent. During the cataclysm, the Picts of the Pictish Islands were almost entirely wiped out, and their land transformed into the mountain ranges of the Americas. Those who remained there would expand and eventually become the people native to the Americas. The surviving Picts on Thuria experienced a steep decline in civilization, resorting to flint tools. Eventually, they went to war with the weakened remnants of the Atlanteans and soon established a nation of savages. 1,000 years after the Lesser Cataclysm, the Picts lived as fearsome wild men inhabiting the caves of southwestern Thuria. Despite their primitive existence, they managed to preserve their language and identity. Unlike other societies, during this period the Picts neither evolved nor devolved and fiercely resisted external contact, although they occasionally reaped its benefit. In one notable instance, a Pictish tribe invaded the fertile valley of Zing, defeated the local population, and settled among them, forming a mixed race that would eventually become Zingara during the High Hyborian Age. During the peak of that age, tales of the hostile Picts were widespread. The Picts ventured into the mountains of Zingara for tin, stole grain from the Bossonian marches, and captured steel weapons and armor from their enemies. They were in constant conflict with their old foes, the Cimmerians, and even served as mercenaries in the Aquilonian armies, much to the disgust of their Bossonian counterparts. Things changed radically about 500 years after Conan's time. In the time of turmoil, there was a man named Aras, a priest of Mitra, hailing from the distant land of Numidia. He was a natural-born reformer with a heart full of compassion and a deep-rooted desire to bring about change. Driven by this inner calling, he dared to embark on a seemingly irrational quest. Aras ventured alone and unarmed into the heart of the savage Pictish wilderness, determined to introduce the barbaric Picts to the splendors of civilization and the peaceful worship of his beloved god, Mithra. Little did he know that his noble intentions would inadvertently ignite a chain of events that would lead to the demise of the Hyborian Age. Aras was fortunate to encounter Chief Gorm, an exceptional Pict with a keen intellect and a natural instinct for conquest. The kind-hearted priest was accepted into Gorm's tribe, where he tirelessly attempted to persuade them to forgive their enemies and embrace the path of peace. He spoke passionately about the benefits of civilization, appealing to their material desires and painting vivid pictures of the Hyborian kingdom's splendor and power, which he attributed to their devotion to Mithra. He spoke about cities made of marble, piles of gold, jewelry made by master craftsmen, fertile fields, proud knights in shining armor, riding glorious horses, and banners dancing in the warm wind. The Picts listened, their eyes alight with visions of wealth and battle victories. But their hearts remained untouched by the spiritual essence of Aras's teaching. Though they were reluctant to abandon their savage ways, the priest never wavered in his optimism, believing that he was making headway with the barbarians. He introduced various reforms, taught the Picts valuable skills like ironworking for agricultural tools, and established a connection between them and the civilized world. Alas, Aras's noble endeavors bore unintended consequences. Gorm, fueled by the newfound knowledge and skills, forged weapons and armor, united the tribes, and declared war on the Hyborian world. The priest, tormented by the realization of his grave mistake, attempted to right the wrongs he had unwittingly set in motion. In a final, desperate act to undo the damage, Aras was tragically struck down by a drunken Pict. Gorm, recognizing the impact Aras had on his life and people, honored the fallen priest with a solemn stone cairn grave, placing the skull of his slayer atop it as a symbol of the tragedy that befell them all. But the things Aras set in motion was started an avalanche of events, causing the death of untold thousands and the collapse of the Hyborian Age. Gorm, king of the Picts, discarded his tiger skin garb and donned a silver mail corselet, leading his steel-clad and scale-armored Picts against the civilized world. Their first target was the Bossonian marches, which initially resulted in a significant battle and subsequent defeat. However, the Picts' second attempt was met with little resistance. Aquilonia had decimated the Bossonian marches in retaliation earlier. The people heroically defending the wealth and life of the Aquilonians were butchered, their towns destroyed, and their women and children taken as slaves. Nobody left on the walls to watch the hordes emerging from the forest from the setting sun. Aquilonia was once again at war with Numidia, their armies fighting in the east. Gorm, now an old leader, orchestrated this second invasion, uniting the entire Pictish nation under the command of Pictish chiefs who had previously served as mercenaries in Aquilonian armies. This time, the Picts charged into the now defenseless Bossonian marches, annihilating the remaining Bossonian forces. They then poured into Aquilonia, taking advantage of the chaos and confusion. As a Cimmerian raid unfolded simultaneously, mercenaries and vassals saw an opportunity to rebel and abandon their posts, further contributing to the mayhem. The Pictish invasion was relentless, with wave after wave of warriors emerging from the wilderness. The Aquilonian legions, summoned from all corners of the empire, were no match for the sheer force of the Pictish onslaught. Vassals and tributaries felt that their master was weak and it was time to strike. Amidst the chaos, Zingara seized the chance to break free from Aquilonian control, with Carinthia and the Shemites quickly following suit. Regiments of mercenaries and vassals began to mutiny and desert, plundering as they retreated to their homelands. As disorder reigned, even the Cimmerians joined the fray, pillaging cities and laying waste to the countryside before retreating to their hills. And there was no calm after the storm, nothing like when the Hyborians conquered this land thousands of years earlier. What came now ended a civilization. With the fall of the Aquilonian Empire, the Picts seized control of its lands and began to erase the remnants of the conquered people. Although they occupied vast territories, the Picts never fully captured Gunderland province of Aquilonia. But in the rest of the kingdom, the destruction was systematic and merciless. The Pictish Empire expanded its borders into Zingara, Argos, and clashed with the Hyrcanians in Ophir. Their advance was eventually halted by the combined efforts of Nordheim, Cimmeria, Nemedia, and the Aesir mercenaries, as well as the Hyrcanians themselves, who were carving their own path of conquest through the continent. At its peak, the Pictish Empire stretched across western Thuria, from Vanaheim to Zingara, and included Ophir, Argos, the western parts of Koth, and Shem. As these two formidable empires, the Picts and the Hyrcanians, faced off, their borders became battlegrounds, with territories like Koth changing hands frequently. Throughout their rule, the Picts maintained their barbaric ways, choosing to live in the crumbling ruins of conquered palaces without adopting the cultures or technologies of their subject. Slowly, the remaining roofs collapsed. The waters of the baths went green with algae and aquatic plants. Instead of music, the song of frogs could be heard at night, as the campfires lit on the intricate stone floors casted light on the scorched walls. They destroyed priceless artifacts and cities, yet never built new ones to replace them. In essence, they remained true to their savage nature. Aquilonia was gone. The Nordic drift eventually caused the Pictish Empire to crumble, leaving them with only the western parts of the continent, Aquilonia, and part of Zingara. As their empire declined, the Picts returned to their primitive Stone Age root. In the end, the Picts were overthrown by the westward migration of the Cimmerians and Nordics from Vilayet, marking the final chapter in their tumultuous history. The Picts were a dark-skinned people, characterized by their swarthy complexion. They were short in stature with very dark skin, black eyes, and hair. Their bodies were robust, featuring broad shoulders, deep chests, lean hips, and well-defined muscles. They dressed minimally, wearing only meager doe-skin loincloths. Their facial expressions rarely changed, but their narrow eyes glistened with the intensity reminiscent of a tiger on the prowl. When a Pict remained still, even animals failed to detect their presence. The Picts were a more rugged, pragmatic, and abundant people. Unlike the Atlanteans, who left behind intricate paintings and carvings on ivory, the Picts focused on crafting highly efficient flint weapons. In the beginning, the Picts dwelled in caves and trees. Over time, they adopted hide tents and brush-thatched mud and wattle huts, taking inspiration from the Bossonians. Within their homes, they displayed the grinning skulls of their enemies. Their villages were filled with mud-walled enclosures where fires flickered, drums resonated, and silent warriors clutched their spears, all while wearing moccasins. These settlements were fortified by stockades featuring wide gates, and at the center lay a ghastly, low pyramid composed of bloodied human heads. In a particular town, stakes intended for the torture and execution of captives are positioned in front of a large building, more significant in size than the other huts. Human skulls adorn the eaves, creating a chilling atmosphere. Inside, a grim stone altar displays 5 grinning human heads. A shadowy, vaguely humanoid idol resembling a bull ape stands behind the altar. The Picts revere this figure as their gorilla god, Gula the Hairy One, who is believed to reside on the moon. The Picts engage in brutal practices such as human sacrifice, blood feuds, and the immolation of captives. The Picts have acquired rudimentary skills in working with copper, bronze, and tin. Although these materials are plentiful in their lands, they venture to the mountains of Zingara to source tin. They trade various items such as hides, whale teeth, walrus tusks, copper ore, and gold dust. Occasionally, ships from Zingara bring weapons, ornaments, and wine to trade with the coastal tribes. Ostrich plumes from Kush are also exchanged and highly valued by Pictish shamans. The Pictish lands teem with wildlife and fish, providing ample resources for their primarily hunter-gatherer lifestyle. They fish in the sea and rivers and have even learned to cultivate grain to a limited extent. However, they prefer to plunder grain from their neighbors, the Bossonians or Zingarans. With no reliance on animal husbandry or agriculture, the Picts have never developed a structured society similar to other nations. Clans within the Pictish culture are often engaged in feuds with one another, and their customs are steeped in violence and bloodshed. Each Pictish clan has its own distinctive tribal designs painted on their faces and chests, with unique markings differentiating warriors from hunters. Typical Pictish attire and equipment include copper bands to bind their tangled hair, necklaces made of human teeth, brass armlets, and tuck and feathers hanging over their left ears. They wield heavy black bows with white notches for each vanquished enemy, short swords, and axes. Their lower jaws are painted white, creating a striking contrast against their dark faces. The most ferocious and barbaric warriors weave shark's teeth into their hair. Shamans adorned with ostrich plumes on a leather and copper harness are almost concealed by their elaborate attire. In combat, Picts may use their teeth as weapons, slashing their opponents' throats from ear to ear, and even scalping their enemies. Imprisoning a Pict in a cell is considered the ultimate insult. Enormous serpents dwell within the Pictish forests, sometimes suspending themselves from branches by their tails to ambush their prey. These serpents are the only things Picts truly fear. Looking at you, Set. Pictish shamans possess the ability to transfer the soul of a captured enemy into a serpent. Both the serpent and the enemy are then beheaded, forcing the foe's spirit to inhabit the serpent's body throughout its next reincarnation. So it is not enough to be killed. They can easily mess up your next life as well. No wonder the Sumerians hated these people. Anyway, that's it for today. Hope you liked the video. Also thanks to Jason Santos, a guy from the comments who advised us to make this video. For your information, we'll rename the channel soon so we can include more topics into our videos. The main idea will be the same, fiction, but we will probably include movies, comics, all sorts of stuff that serves as escapism to us. So stay tuned, more fun stuff coming soon. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos about the worlds of literature and mythology. See you in the next adventure.